Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to the Tenpenny Files. I'm your host, Dr. Sherri Tenpenny. The Tenpenny Files isn't just another interview show. I hold daily discussions with guests whose research reveals evidence that challenges official narratives and is commonly seen in the headlines. Topics span the spectrum from national government history, astronomy, the economy, travel, to food and fitness, to health policy, and of course, vaccines, and to authors who write about faith and biblical principles. I want to introduce you to topics you've never heard of and to topics you wish you had more time to explore. For listeners ready to question the stories they've been told, the Tenpenny Files is the show for you. Join me here every day at 3 p.m. Eastern Time to hear from authors and documentary filmmakers who have something important to say, but have been silenced, ignored, or censored. But before I introduce you to today's guest, I want to encourage you to become a Tenpenny Prime member. You will benefit from a monthly article, a monthly pre-recorded PowerPoint presentation that's educational, and an Ask the Expert masterclass at the end of each month. Go to primembership.drtenpenny.com, click on the membership tab to learn more about it or to join. Now let's just jump into today's conversation with my guest, Dr. Amy Hayek, a holistic veterinarian, to discuss her book, Predicting Animal Wellness, which offers a new framework on prevention and long-term animal health. Dr. Amy, welcome so much to the Tenpenny Files. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to join me here today.
Thank you so much, Dr. Tenpenny, for inviting me to be here. I know we've had many talks, and you always inspire me to want to do more.
Well, you already do so much. It's just so much of what you do. But your book, Predicting Animal Wellness, is a different type of book. Tell us how this is different from monitoring and managing symptoms of our animals. And for those of you that have been watching and following my show for a while, you know about my little dog, Tegan, is just the little love of my life. And Amy is my long distance animal chiropractor / friend that helps me keep Tegan healthy. So let's talk about monitoring versus managing symptoms.
Absolutely. It was kind of inspired by the fact that for many years, I, as a veterinarian, would see these patients that would have, emergency issues. And I always felt bad for the clients because I kept thinking, well, can't they see it coming? Because it's not a surprise. I mean, there's lots of things that happen to our pets that aren't a surprise. For instance, in the winter, it gets dark, and in the summer, there's more daylight. And we know that it's going to happen every time. And we see patterns. And I was starting to see patterns of illness and injury and things that would happen that would just clump up. Part of it came probably from I had some training in animal acupuncture, and acupuncture looks at patterns as well. And so that was kind of an initial, hey, we should do this. Veterinary medicine doesn't look at patterns that way. It looks at patterns like anybody who has this symptom has this disease. And to me, that was just you have to memorize a lot of stuff. But for me, being able to see that there's a pattern, it happens the same time of year, it happens in the same kind of environment, was something I could share with clients so that they could start to prevent or notice that their animal was headed into some illness or injury that they could have prevented or avoided. And so I started writing about those things. I had a mobile equine practice in Somerville, South Carolina for, I don't know, almost 20 years. And one of the things I would do is I would hold client education seminars where they could come in and I would teach them some of these things. And it started off by talking about just, how we lose daylight and we gain daylight, and it's not new. I mean, look at Stonehenge. So that was definitely a way to start to help clients predict and avoid some of the emergencies that would happen in their lives. And because, I mean, let's face it, I realize that, clients need someone in a lot of situations to be able to say, it's going to be okay. It's okay. What your animal's doing right now is going to be all right. And I wanted them to have that kind of power too.
When did you realize that prediction of future illnesses or injuries was even a possibility? How did you come to realize that?
Probably just from over the years seeing a lot of it. The other thing that happened, I think, was I was influenced by a woman. She was a biochemist, and you remind me of her a little bit in that she wanted to be able to help people. She was involved. She lived in Flint, Michigan, when they discovered that the water was contaminated. And she started looking at environmental issues with not just people. She, as a biochemist, she worked in the hospital, but she also had racehorses of her own. And so she started seeing similarities between what was going on with the people and what was going on with the horses. Her name was Lindsay McLean, and I was put in touch with her through a client who started hearing about her and reading about her. And Lindsay and I became friends and would work together monitoring some of the things that were going on with these animals. And that was when I started recognizing that it was the things in our environment that oftentimes affect health. And so we have a tendency, I think, to think of the environment as something out there, you know. When we think of poisons that are in the environment, we oftentimes think of something, somebody a long ways away put into the water or the soil or the whatever. But I think for me, with that relationship, I realized that a lot of the things that are in the environment that affect us and affect our animals go in through this hole. And that's when I started looking more closely at, people talk about what's available during what parts of the year for horses in particular, because they are grazers. So they're out there eating grass, and it's not always the same grass. I mean, there are farms where they only grow a monoculture of grass. And this is where we were talking earlier, and you had mentioned Joel Salatin and how he and I connect on that. And they had done some studies where cattle had better immune systems when they had a plethora of plants to choose from. So instead of just, acres and acres of bluegrass, if they were allowed to go and pick and choose the forage that they wanted, they did better. And that was kind of something I started thinking about, was that through the year, through the season, plants don't always grow all summer long or all year round. Plants, like different animals, only exist in certain temperatures and certain moistures. And I mean, think about it. There are some flowers that only bloom in the morning. There are flowers that only bloom at night. And during those different times, those plants do different things. And so I started, all this started coming up, and I started looking things up and realizing that our environment is never really one thing. It's moving and changing all day long, all month long, all season long, all year long. And that if we look for those changes that we know are happening, we can predict how it's going to affect that animal. And that's kind of where a lot of it came from.
What are some of the early signals animals give us that something is not right, or that we usually miss? Either we miss it or we dismiss it as we think it's normal, or they're just being annoying or whatever is wrong with them?
or
what
they're
really
just having a
signals?
bad day.
Yeah, have a bad day because they have moods just like we do. They have some days that they're just cranky and they want to be left alone. And other days they're like really playful and, they want to go for walks. So, what are some of the signals that they give us that pet owners can start watching for that they normally just dismiss?
It's a great question. One of the first things I recommend pet owners do is check daily temperatures,
Wow.
because that internal temperature is a measure for metabolism. And I mean, I loved chemistry as a kid in high school, but it was not my favorite class. I'll tell you that. I don't think it's anybody's favorite class. But it helped me realize that inside our bodies, there's constantly a chemical experiment going on. And it's temperature dependent, it's pressure dependent, it's moisture dependent, all of those things. So the example I often use is when you go to bake a cake, you have to put in the right amount of ingredients. And I've had other cooks tell me that baking is harder than cooking, than being a chef, because you have to get the ingredients right. The other thing you have to make sure of is that it's baked at the right temperature. And if you don't, we don't get the right chemical responses from that flour and eggs and whatever else goes in it. And so we don't get a cake at the end. We might have, you can try it. So you can try baking a cake at 150 degrees, but it won't look like a cake when you're done. And I think the same thing happens in our animals. If we don't have them cooking at that normal temperature for them, then they can't have the normal chemical responses. And we see it a lot because in horses in particular, and that's partly because that's my interest. I've seen veterinary schools that are starting to try to say that horse normal temperatures are lower than they used to be. And part of that is if you go out and take the temperatures of 100 horses in a pasture, many of them will only be 99, 98, some will be 97. A normal horse temperature when I was in veterinary school was 101.5.
Wow.
And what that tells me, what that lower than normal temperature tells me, is that there's something in the environment that's depressing the metabolism of those animals so they can't their internal furnace isn't working.
So are these animals, are they developing thyroid issues? Because in a human, that's the first thing you would think of when I would hear a story like that. Are they developing thyroid issues?
Absolutely.
Wow.
Absolutely. And a big part of it comes from how we keep them, what they're eating, the environment they're living in. We're taking, I'm sorry, my brain just goes whoop, like in that it wants to pull in human analogies too. We take them out of a herd environment, which is where they evolved to live, and we put them in single stalls with four walls and no windows and say, here, live a healthy life. And then we take them off of the grass and they just get the hay we put in front of them. And they don't really get to live like the horse that they were evolved to be. And I see similarities to what we're doing with humans. We're isolating people from their communities. Up until 1940, more people lived in the rural areas than lived in cities. And it was there's like this magic cutoff. All of a sudden, more people lived in cities because they were looking for work. They were moving out of the rural areas because of things that were happening on the farms, Dust Bowl, all those things. And what happened there was that people started living in, more isolation. even though they were living in town, they were trying to separate themselves, live in apartments, things like that. And if we think about people now, we're even more separated because we don't get in big groups. We do more virtually online. We have, screen time. So I see some of the similarities happening to humans as well, where with horses, we've isolated them and their health is declining. With humans, we've isolated them and their health is declining. So I think that makes us more vulnerable to some of the environmental aspects of what we're seeing these days.
You said that it would be good to take an animal's temperature every day. I think you have to take the temperature rectally, correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
And what would be a normal temperature for dogs, or does that range depending on if it's a little dog or a big dog?
Good question. Yeah, dog temperature is 101 to 102.
Okay.
And yes, you would take it rectally, and you probably don't have to take it every single day. One of my favorite clients was a guy who was an engineer in the South Carolina practice. And he had a horse that we were managing with a metabolic issue. And what he did was he put this big calendar up on his inside barn wall. And because he had learned from me to take the temperature when you saw issues going on. And on that calendar, I would walk in to see his horse, and I would see on the calendar he had taken the temperature for 5 days before I got there, so that I could see, was this temperature rising or declining? The other thing he kept on that calendar, which was partly because you'll find this in the book, some of those predictions happen based on moon cycles,
Hmm.
and a long time ago, farmers depended on that farmer's almanac to decide when to plant and when to harvest and when to wean their calves and when to do some of these things. And it's really and truly, I used to get kind of funny looks when I talk to people about that, but it's really and truly about gravity. And so he would, because it's water weight. And so he would also keep the moon cycle posted on that calendar too. So he could see himself. Yeah, if the temperature is dropping on my horse, it's, we've got a full moon coming up. So we might have an illness or injury incident because of that.
Yeah, you talk about that a lot in your book. You spend a lot of time talking about moon cycles with parasites and with sunburn on horses' backs and on all those different things. Another thing in your book, and the book title is Predicting Animal Wellness, you say is that animals communicate with gestures, facial expressions, through odor and sounds. If animals could speak to us in full sentences, what do you think they would say about how we're managing their health today?
That's a good question. I think one of the things animals might say to us is, why aren't you paying more attention? Um, we have, so in humans, we have this thing, it's called a vomeronasal gland, and it's under your lip and right under your nose. Animals have that too. And that is the gland that takes in things like, some of the chemicals in the air. Do you ever walk into a room and there's somebody there that you probably just don't see eye to eye with, and you get that tense feeling?
Sure.
Sometimes that's because you're picking up those hormones or chemicals that are coming from that person. And we have trained ourselves to not pay attention to that information nearly as much as we used to. I think that sometimes we talk about how, you go in a place and you're just certain that somebody's watching you, or the hair is raised on the back of your neck, that kind of thing. And that is still part of that communication, but we've been trained to ignore some of those signals. You ever watch little kids? You put their clothes on and you send them outside to play, and the first thing they do is rip all their clothes off. And we have to learn to do things like keep our clothes on and ignore the fact that we're wearing them, or that they're uncomfortable, or that the tag in the back is itching. All of those things, we've trained our brains to ignore that. And animals, they don't have that part of inhibition in their systems. So they would probably say, why aren't you paying attention? Can't you see that? Can't you hear that? Don't you smell it? And so that's probably what I think they would say.
So that we're not paying close enough attention to the signals that they're giving us about being uncomfortable or hungry or, thirsty or things like that. What do you think our biggest misunderstanding is of our animals trying to communicate with us and we're just not paying attention? What's our biggest misunderstanding with that?
Biggest misunderstanding. There's so many.
Well, just pick a couple.
I'll try not to, I love people too, so I don't want them to feel like I'm throwing them under the bus. But I think one of our biggest misunderstandings is that we ignore that environment that surrounds us and how it impacts our animals. We may forget that it's spring or it's fall or it's whatever day of the year it is. We just went through the shortest day of the year. And in my practice, I used to, this time of the year, between Halloween and New Year's, most people call that the holiday season. But in a lot of veterinary practices, that's really the euthanasia season.
Oh, wow.
And it in part is because even though those animals have been noticing our lack of daylight starting in June, it really becomes more noticeable. And when they have chronic illnesses, it manifests even more so when when the days are so much shorter. And it's not unusual for owners, when their animal is suffering or having an issue, to bring them in and say, can we fix this? And what they really mean is before Thanksgiving or before Christmas, or, because if I'm having in the dog situation, if I'm having to carry him outside every day to pee and he can't get up and go and he's peeing in the house or he's pooping in the house, and Thanksgiving's coming up and my relatives are coming over and they already don't approve of me having a dog in the house because, there are relationships involved. And so it's not unusual for people, because they feel that stress and burden, to elect to just, oh, well, he's just had a good life and this is really hard on him. Let's just euthanize him now. But we see that a lot.
Wow, that's really hard. That's really hard to think about that. And you mentioned also that we've heard so many veterinarians are suffering from burnout and are quitting the profession, possibly because of all this euthanizing of pets. I mean, I saw a patient in the office who was a veterinarian, and she said, I just can't do this anymore. It seems like that's all I do is euthanizing pets. So if those veterinarians were to adopt the predicting animal wellness, would that change some of the burnout patterns that we're seeing in that profession?
I think so. For me, it did. It changed my practice in a really big way. And there were a couple of things that happened in my practice that helped me to do that. And one was I paid more attention to nutrition. And the other was chiropractic care, because chiropractic for me, animal chiropractic, was I could do magic things. For horses, oftentimes having founder or laminitis, sore front feet, is the kiss of death. You're not going to be able to fix it. They're going to have this forever. You're going to have to manage it all the time. A lot of medications. And for me, I would welcome those cases. I can help this animal. So much so that part of it was the food that we're feeding. So my work with Lindsay McLean was she had developed a horse food for animals, for horses. And since her death in I want to say 2019, nobody's been able to get a hold of that food. But we just in the last 2 years started producing a food that mimics that food so that we can solve these cases, these that are basically on death's door. The laminitis is a whole system problem. It's not just their front feet. And when people talk about those things, I'm like, bring it on, let's get them fixed. And we usually have them up and walking and doing better within 4 to 6 weeks, which is really remarkable for what happens with most of those animals.
Wow. Well, we know that nutrition, you are what you eat when it comes to human beings, and it certainly is you are what you eat when it comes to animals and animal food. We could spend a lot of time talking about that. But for right now, we're going to take a really quick break. So hold that thought. We're going to take a short break to hear from our sponsors on AmericaOutloud.news. America Out Loud Radio plays the Tenpenny Files on the iHeartRadio network daily, Monday through Friday at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. You can also listen to this show and other shows on AmericaOutloud.news by clicking onto their site, logging into their media player, and you can listen from anywhere in the world. If you've missed any of these really great conversations, you can find the Tenpenny Files on Spotify, Pandora, Apple, TuneIn, iHeart Virtual Studio, and on my platform at drtenpenny.com and drtenpenny.substack.com. If you go to the website, you just hover over the podcast tab and you'll see a link right below that you can go and watch all of the past episodes of this show. Because there are so many great books and documentaries and so little time in our busy lives to read and to watch, this show is meant to maximize your time and jumpstart your interest into areas that you may not have thought about before or areas that you've always wanted to spend more time. And again, you just didn't have the time to do it. So sit tight. We'll be back to talk more with Dr. Amy Hayek about predicting animal wellness. We will be right back. Zeolite is a detox spray. We work specifically with a company called Touchstone Essentials. They are an incredible company. We've been working with them now for several years. And zeolite is a mineral that goes through your body like a one-way basket. It will clean out heavy metals such as arsenic and mercury, aluminum, cadmium, and it hooks onto those metals from a one-way perspective. So once it's bound, it goes out through your urine or your stools and doesn't get redeposited in other places. Everybody needs to have a detox product in their life, and this one is so easy to use and it's so safe. You can take it when you're pregnant, you can take it when you're nursing, you can give it to little children, you can even give it to infants, and quite frankly, I give it to my dog. I actually put a little bit of the zeolite in his water because until we all stop living in a toxic world, we all need to get some of those extra toxicities out, the heavy metals, the persistent organic pollutants, the things that are floating through the air, the different things that we come in touch with in our environment. And we are a big fan of zeolite from Touchstone Essentials. We've been a big fan of their products for several years. Go to drtenpenny.com/detox to get your first bottle of zeolite spray for $50 off.
Well, only when the government bows to the people will America become great again. This is Malcolm Out Loud here. Join me in pushing back against censorship, my fellow Americans. Right at the top of AmericaOutloud.news are the words, many voices, one freedom, united in the First Amendment. Now is our time, my fellow Americans. AmericaOutloud.news, liberty and justice for all.
Well, welcome back, everyone. Dr. Amy Hayek is a holistic veterinarian, and she's been discussing her book and the concept of predicting animal wellness, which offers a new framework for prevention and long-term animal health. Let me tell you a little bit more about our guest and my friend, Dr. Amy Hayek. Dr. Amy Hayek is a veterinarian who approaches animal health through the study of consistent patterns within the animal, its structure and function, and its environment, patterns that allow us to anticipate shifts towards wellness or illness before clinical breakdown occurs. Drawing on decades of experience in animal chiropractic and education, she challenges the reactive model of care and patient wellness, and it because it is predictable and an observable process. Through her book, Predicting Animal Wellness, she offers a new framework for long-term animal health. Dr. Amy, you emphasize patterns over isolated symptoms. You actually even list a very long list of conditions in your book that you kind of say, but they're all related. They just have taken symptoms and given them a different name. And they're all related to overall environmental stresses and food problems with the animals. Can you share a case where the pattern of the truth was faster than diagnostics once you were evaluating an animal?
Absolutely. I find that oftentimes when we go back and look at the pattern, we can get to a solution so much faster than we can if we go through all the diagnostics and MRIs and CT scans and blood work and all those things. And it costs less. And so some examples would be some of the easiest examples would be some of these dogs that come in with, they're diagnosed with back problems. They're diagnosed with intervertebral disc disease, and they've been told that, we need an MRI and surgery, and it's going to be $5,000, $10,000, $15,000 to do this. And those dogs, the honest truth is that if you look it up, you'll find that I'm trying to think of VCA reports that they have like a 95% success rate if they can get the dog to surgery quickly. One of the things that we've found is that those dogs can come to us at almost any point in their illness or paralysis. And we've had like a 95% success rate within 10 days.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, I know for myself, and we're going to have you back on the show, you and Dr. O, your husband, who have kind of pioneered this whole area of animal chiropractic, and we're going to have you back on the show just because I love the name of your other book, which is It's a Thing, Animal Chiropractic. So we're going to take a deep dive into that on another show. But in brief, explain to our audiences, what does long-term wellness look like if animals are given regular chiropractic care? I can say for my dog, I have a little dog. He's 12 and a half pounds. He's on a diet now. I am going to get him back down to 10 pounds where he belongs. But there was a veterinarian that you recommended that I see here that went through your training, Dr. Boo, spelled B-U-E. And then Tegan has some issues with his neck and his shoulder. And I went to see another animal chiropractor who was a human chiropractor taking your animal training in Sarasota, Florida when I was down there. And one treatment, and he's just like back to like a new animal. And so it's the long-term health and wellness of animals is really pretty amazing when they get regular chiropractic care. Talk to the audience a little bit about what that really means, animal chiropractic care.
Thanks for asking that. Yes. So when we say routine or regular, we mean, I think the big difference that for most people is recognizing that chiropractic care is is helping the animal to wellness, whereas veterinary care is essentially keeping the animal from dying. So if you just listen to some of the terminology from veterinary advertising and when you're speaking to your veterinarian, you'll find that a lot of the conversation is about keeping your animal from dying and how close they are to death if they don't have XYZ medication or whatever. But I think for I got off topic now. Tell me that question again.
What does animal chiropractic do for the animals, and why should they get regular chiropractic adjustments?
Yeah. So the easy part is this. Chiropractic isn't what we do to the animal. It's what the animal is then able to do for itself after we've removed the interference in its nervous system. Our nervous systems are amazing. They do millions of things every day. They do, I don't even know how many activities happen in the brain every second that you don't have to think about. I mean, we don't have to think about breathe in, breathe out. If we did, we'd forget other things like
Heart beating.
yeah, beat your heart and digest your food and
Yeah.
all those things. And so the brain is this amazing ability to multitask all of this stuff at once. And our animals are able to do that too. Life happens, right? And we can have injuries that cause interference in that nervous system. And if we can remove the interferences, then the brain can continue to do all those millions of things that it's supposed to all at the same time.
Well, I know that, since I remember this was not too terribly long ago. I was traveling and Tegan was staying with a friend of mine. And when I went to pick him up, she said, there's something wrong. He won't put any weight on his right foot, front leg at all. And it's not like he was limping on it. He would not put any weight on it. And I looked it up online. It said it was a veterinarian emergency. I had to take him immediately to the veterinary, to the ER. And I thought, I have neither the time nor the money today to do that, even though I spoil my dog endlessly. So I called you, and you were in an airport when I hooked up with you, and I said, Amy, what's wrong? Is this really an emergency? Do I really need to do that? And she just very calmly said, no, he needs his neck adjusted. And I said, okay, how do I do that? And you walked me through, extension of both arms at the elbows, and I looked up the animal anatomy. I found a picture of what the animals look like, what dogs look like, because they don't have collarbones and they have really pretty large shoulder blades. And so you said, when he's jumping off the bed or off the couch, he just kind of, jammed up one side, and you walked me through it, and I heard this big click, and I put him on the floor, and he gave a good shake from head to toe and started just going about his business. And I'm thinking, oh my goodness, this was just amazing. So animal chiropractic is a real thing, and it really, really does help. And when we have you back on the show the next time, I'm going to have Dr. O and you talk about adjusting baby chickens and adjusting cows, because we'll save that as a teaser for the audience for what we're going to talk about the next time, because I really want to focus back on this predicting animal wellness that we're talking about today. For listeners who get your book, Predicting Animal Wellness, because they love their animals. I mean, I think that sometimes people love their animals more than they love their kids. Or they love them as much as their kids, and they become very much part of the family, and they're very attached to them. And it's, just thinking about the lack of longevity with animals, and you want them to live as long as they possibly can when you've got a dog or a cat or a horse or a goat or whatever your pet is. For listeners who really want to start reading your book and Predicting Animal Wellness, what is the first thing they should stop ignoring and start paying attention to when it comes to their pets?
The first thing that I would like people to pay attention to is, you could take their temperature and keep a little log. And also check, what time of the month is it? How close are we to a full moon? When was their last veterinary visit? Because oftentimes, trauma, toxins, and thoughts are what can cause those interferences in the nervous system. And for animals, when they go to the veterinarian doesn't mean this to happen, but there's all kinds of, maybe not physical trauma, but emotional trauma for animals. And if they got some kind of medication or a vaccination, they end up with toxins in their system too. And all of those things can manifest as some injury or illness later on within, we say anything within a month of that visit.
Wow. Well, I find that I'm so grateful to have you to talk to. And I have another holistic vet that's here locally that have taken Tegan to see her ever since he was a little puppy, because this particular breed, the Japanese chins, they have luxating patellas. For the audience, that means that their kneecap kind of pops in and out of place on their back legs. And I've been taking him to see her since he was a little puppy, and she does laser acupuncture on his legs, and it really helps him a lot. But and I'm so glad and we talk about nutrition and about treats and about weight and, all the holistic things with my animal, that if you came to my practice in Cleveland and saw me or one of the other practitioners, that we would talk about keeping humans healthy, about your gut biome, microbiome, and about sleep and staying away from seed oils and all these different things. Because it's been my experience when I first got him as a baby puppy. He's going to a regular vet is like going to a regular pediatrician. All they want to do is make sure they're up to date on all their vaccines, and they keep injecting them and injecting them, injecting them. They don't care if you get like crappy food from the grocery store, the kibble that has no nutritional value at all, and all those sorts of things. So you, as a holistic veterinarian, are just, you're just worth your weight 10 times in gold. Is there a way that people can be in contact with you and you can do telemedicine with people around the country about their pets?
There is. You can get a hold of me through our website, our clinic website, which is allcreatureseveryspine.com. And on there's a link for a nutritional consult, which involves them filling in some information that I would need to know about their pet before we can have a good conversation about it. And we might order some simple, diagnostics so we can look back. So a blood test is a pinpoint what happened today, but a hair test, tissue mineral analysis, gives us a longer look back into that animal's, life, what's been happening for the last 6 months, those kinds of things. So sometimes I will order those. But that's probably the best way, is allcreatureseveryspine.com.
That's amazing. That's wonderful. And it's so worth every penny, because you're just a wealth of information. What's the biggest myth about animal wellness that keeps animals stuck in this veterinary cycle of care that happens to them? That's just really, the couple of times that Tegan had before I started getting him regular chiropractic care, and he had, I took him because he wouldn't walk. He just would walk across the kitchen floor and just like freeze and not move. And I knew he was in pain. And I took him to the emergency room because he wouldn't walk. And they just said, well, there's something wrong with his back. And they gave me 4 prescriptions, which I didn't fill any of them. And they wanted to give him a shot of pain medicine. And like, you're just in this conventional cycle of medicate, vaccinate your animal, just like human doctors, pediatricians do with vaccinate, then medicate your babies. How do we get out of that stuck cycle of care with our animals?
It's hard. And to be honest, that is one of my missions. We just had a conference this last weekend called Base Camp, where we bring in animal chiropractors who want to do more and be more leaders in the animal chiropractic world. And we talked about exactly that cycle. And part of that cycle is what we see happening all over the country now. Veterinary practices are getting bought up by corporations. So, some of the big corporations that are buying up the medical field, and that own all the pharmaceutical companies, are buying up veterinary hospitals as well. Then, the doctor who used to be one of the most trusted people in your life, was your veterinarian, is getting, removed from that relationship with their clients as much as they used to be, when these big corporations come in, they want to start adding on the backside more diagnostics and more, they want to increase the profits because they've got the corporate stakeholders to fulfill. Whereas your veterinarian was, the one who would cry with you and be there in the moment and do all those things. And they're kind of removing that relationship. Not only that, these corporations are also owning things like pet insurance.
Mm.
And so once your pet is in that cycle, they've come into the corporate office, which is most of the, a lot of your bigger referral clinics where they can do all these things. And people have been trained that the bigger the clinic, the safer my animal's going to be because he's going to get everything. So there's that. And then the other part of that is that once they're into that cycle, just like our pediatricians, they're into that sick cycle. They're not into the wellness cycle. So chiropractic is really there to help animal owners maintain wellness versus veterinary medicine has kind of fallen into that. It's trying to march lockstep with what's happening to MDs, where they're learning to medicate and, follow a certain standard of care and, become that same money-making machine.
And one of the main differences that I've observed, my local holistic vet that's here, she hired a new vet tech assistant who had worked for one of those big mega clinics on the other side of town. And she said, I just couldn't do it anymore because they were all about blood tests and x-rays and prescribing things and surgeries. And then when the animal would get cancer, then it was all about surgery and chemotherapy and really expensive types of treatments. And then the animal would die. And then the veterinarian who had done the oncology on the animal said, well, I guess you're just going to get a new puppy this year. Just like it was no big deal. Got rid of one, let's just go get another one. Now, fortunately, we can't do that with kids. It's like, well, that one died, just go have another one. But that's the way so many of these big enterprises, I believe, have migrated towards that. It's they just do what they can do. And particularly if you have veterinarian insurance, they're going to run your insurance for CAT scans and MRIs. I mean, when Tegan was having that problem with his back, I mean, they were like, well, he really needs to get an MRI to find out what's going on. It's like, how much is that going to cost? It was like $1,600 for my little dog. And, what you had taught me is that when he gets up and he's had a chiropractic adjustment, when he gives a full body shake, he starts with his head and goes all the way down his back, and then stomps his feet a couple of times and goes skittle-scalling across the room. He doesn't have a herniated disc, because if he had a herniated disc, he wouldn't be able to do that. I mean, you would think that would be something like veterinarians would know, but it just seems as though it's sadly, it's as much of a racket as what human healthcare has become.
You're right. And so one of the things that we try to teach our clients is a little bit of what I taught you from the airport on the phone. And that is check for leg length. All right. Is he symmetrical from one side to the other? And so being able to extend each of those front legs evenly lets us know, are the muscles on both sides of that neck and those front legs working symmetrically? If they're not, it tells us that there's probably an interference that's causing one to not be able to extend as well. And it just so happened in Tegan's case that his was not in his spine. It was more like peripheral, probably his elbow. And so the exam that you did solved it.
Yeah. When I lifted his his right one was the one he wouldn't stand on. And when I extended his left one, from his elbow all the way up and back, that one he sort of gimped on. He didn't want me to move that one. And I sort of just did it gently. And when I got it up high enough and took it a little bit out laterally, it let out a really large click. And you said, okay, you fixed it. It's sort of like the same thing when his kneecaps go out. I looked it up online, what was the adjustment to be able to put his kneecaps back in place. And, I followed the instructions on the video and it went click. And you said, you did the right thing. You have to listen for the click. So there's so many cool things that can be done to help our pets and to give them good quality food, which is a little bit more expensive, just like organic food is for humans. But it makes such a big difference in their life of what they're eating, that they're not eating baked out, awful sort of commercial grade food and all those different things. So it's just amazing what we can do for animal wellness. We've got about 1 minute left, Amy, here in our time here together today. What would you like to leave our listeners with about taking better care of their pets' health?
I would say the one thing that you can do best is to find an animal chiropractor near you who's going to help you learn how to measure some of those things, like leg length exams or temperatures or those kinds of, so that you can predict if your animal is going down a road that they need assistance with. And then you'll know that how to get it done in a timely manner. One of the ways people can find that person is to go to acesalumni.com. So ACES alumni.com. And it'll take you to a page that has all of our graduates on it. There's a map. At the top, you'll click a button and it'll take you to a map so you can find who's close to you. So you don't have to weed your way through the whole list.
That's just that in itself is just worth its weight in gold, so that everyone can find an animal chiropractor that takes care of their pets that are the love of their life. So Dr. Amy, thank you so much for being here with us today. We've learned so much about how to take care of our pets today and how to predict for things in the future, how to pay closer attention to our pets and watch for things and kind of like look at the moon cycle to take care of that. And you talk about that a lot in your book, Predicting Animal Wellness. So I want to thank everybody who's joined us here today on our daily show on AmericaOutloud.news and iHeartRadio. And with that, I'm going to close out with one of my favorite verses from the Bible. I close all of my podcasts with, whether they are live or pre-recorded, which is Romans 12:12. Rejoice in hope, be patient in trouble, and be persistent in prayer. Lean into God. He will never let you down. I'll see you here tomorrow or the next time at 3 p.m. Eastern time, right here on AmericaOutloud.news and iHeartRadio. You can also find us at drtenpenny.com. When you hover over the podcast tab, you can see what's coming up for the week, what you've missed, and they're always there available on our Substack at drtenpenny.substack.com. My Sunday Substack is tenpennywalkwithgod.substack.com. I don't believe in paywalls. If I'm going to spend the time to write it, I want you to read it. So please sign up for free. The more followers we have, the better that is for us to be able to get the information out. So go to drtenpenny.substack.com or tenpennywalkwithgod.substack.com. Sign up for free. And please follow me on X and Instagram at Busy Dr. T. And it's the one with the little blue check mark that's the real one. We have hundreds and hundreds of fake accounts out there. We will never solicit you to buy Bitcoin or to do any of those things that people are always telling us about. That's not us. So follow us at X at Busy Dr. T and on Instagram at Busy Dr. T. Have a great rest of your day, everyone. We will see you here again, Monday through Friday, 3 p.m. Eastern on AmericaOutloud.news and iHeartRadio. Have a good week, everybody. Have a good rest of your day. God bless. Goodbye. God bless.